So in today's video, I'm going to be going over why I don't own any books as a minimalist and kind of my journey towards that from someone that went through a phase of collecting a lot of books and then never reading them. So I'm just going to talk about that. So growing up, I loved to read. I would read a book a week, literally. So it's not that I'm just not a reader. I am a reader by nature, I guess you could say, but I definitely stopped reading as I got older, and then I got back into it in the past few years. I think I have a few videos on my channel about like book hauls or how to read more. I had a Kindle, don't even have a Kindle anymore. There's books that I love, but that I would just not reread. So my reasoning is that I don't reread books. So by the way, the only book that I own is the Bible. I have my OG everyday Bible, and then I have my on-the-go Bible for like church or just on the road. And then I do have a Spanish Bible because I go to Spanish church. But I'm gonna be honest, I kind of categorize that as like family belongings instead of my personal belonging because it's kind of just always in the car. And so sometimes I will use it at church. Most of the time I would just use this one and it's in English and I just kind of translate in my brain. But I am thinking of taking it back as personal belonging over family belonging because I think my Spanish is just going to improve if I am constantly reading the Bible in Spanish as well as English. So those are the books I own. And then my reasoning for not owning any other books, despite having a lot of books that I do love, is that I'm not a rereader. Once I've read a book, I don't tend to go back and reread. There's been very few books that I do that with. So for example, I actually have a video on all the books that I own. I used to have 4 books, and it was The Secret Garden, A Little Princess, The Hunger Games, and I don't even remember the last, so it must have not been that good. But I love those books, and I will rewatch Hunger Games every single year. And oh, Jane Eyre, that's the best. That is my favorite book ever besides the Bible, okay? Jane Eyre. I love that book, okay? But it's not something that, like, I had it on my shelf for years and I would always say, I want to reread it, and I would just never reread it. And so it ended up just being like a checklist in my brain of something I had to do every time I would see it. And I just wouldn't do because I'm not a rereader. I'm a rewatcher for movies, but I'm not a rereader, and I'll just be honest about it. It's just not me. I'm not going to reread the book. When I read a book, I highlight a bunch of stuff. I love it, and if I love the quote so much, I will write it in my forever journal, and that's all I need. I don't feel the need to reread the story, if that makes sense. So that's the reason that I don't own any books, is because I'm not a rereader, and I am not a book collector. I know a lot of people like to. I also, at the time that I was collecting books, I was watching a lot of Haley fan videos, which love her, and Ryan Trahan, okay? But she's trying to build up a library. I'm not. I don't want a bunch of random books that I'm never going to reread again in my personal belongings. And so I would watch her videos and think that I had to have a book collection to prove that I like to read, but honestly, you don't need that. And something I learned from minimalism is that you don't need to have stuff to prove that you enjoy doing something. I remember back when I wanted to be a full-time teacher, I would think up of how I wanted to decorate my classroom, and I wanted to have certain posters to kind of show that I'm interested in that. And you don't need to have posters or merch or stuff like that to prove that you like something if it's not something that you really want. You know, like for me, I love clear walls. Some people think it's boring, okay, but I feel very calm. And versus having a lot of stuff on my walls, I get really overstimulated by that. So I prefer to have not a lot of stuff on my walls. And that doesn't mean that I have no interest. It's just I don't feel the need to display all of my interests. So whomever will come and see what I'm interested in, you know, because it doesn't matter. The people that truly know you know what you're interested in, despite you not having decorations of it, if that makes sense. Or like trinkets. I just don't like trinkets either, okay? And I need to focus on the books. This video is about books. Yeah, so I decluttered all my books once I was very honest with myself, and I told myself, like, I'm not going to reread these. And if there's ever a book that I find that I do desire to reread, then of course I would purchase that book and keep it. There is actually a book that I know once I have kids, Lord willing, that I do plan on purchasing. I love the book, The Sour Grape. If you haven't read the book, please. I always read it to my students. I love that book, okay? And just children's books like that, obviously, I would keep. And I want my kids to be very literate and very into books, so that's definitely something that I'll do. But I think there's books that are categorized for me personally as forever books, and then there's books that are just library books. So I would very much make use of my library once I have children, and you know, they can borrow books that they're just going to read once and then return them. I did go through a phase of going to the library a lot of times. And there's also, I have on my iPad right here, there's an app, it's called Libby. It's through your library where you can get free ebooks online. But I personally just find that they don't have the books that I'm interested in most of the time. So how I read books is on my iPad. And so I use the Apple Books app. And what I do, there's this website where it has free PDFs of whatever book that you want to read. It's legal, it's free, and of course you can donate if you'd like to. So I pretty much go onto that website and I download the books. These are like books that I have currently. That's just like books How to Quit Sugar, books by Elizabeth Elliot, cookbooks. I really want to read Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. And I have like minimalism books, obviously Christian books, all of that good stuff. So that's how I read on my iPad. I had a Kindle and it just felt like another device, just again, to prove that I read, when I have a fully functioning iPad that works perfectly fine, that I can also read on. And so yeah, I read on my iPad. I don't have any physical books, and I really recommend trying it out. Again, I always recommend with minimalism, if you're thinking of getting rid of stuff but you're not completely sure, have a pile. And then, I'm so sorry about my hair, by the way. I know I should have said that a long time ago, but it just won't stay, okay? I know it's bothering me, but whatever. There are bigger things happening in the world. Set your stuff in a pile, but you're not sure if you want to declutter. And then if you haven't touched it or even thought about it for, 3 to 6 months, you probably don't need it. So I would get rid of it if I were you. I know a lot of people are against ebooks because they just love having a physical book, which I totally understand and I relate. But I'd say go to the library if you want to do that. There were times where I'd go to the library and then I just had a bunch of I would get 30 books at once, and then that would also bother me that they were all there and it was just pushing at me you haven't read me yet. So I just love having everything on my iPad. I will also say a genuine worry or thought that comes across my mind a lot is if there ever were, Fahrenheit 451 case, or books were banned and stuff, and I'm if I had the physical book, then I wouldn't have to worry about that. Just I have DVDs, and if streaming were ever to go away, I have stuff, you know what I mean? But I also think that despite me loving a lot of books, they are not as important to me personally as having the Bible. So as long as I have this, I have all the books I need, physically speaking. So even though that thought does come across my mind, or if there were ever a fire, in my house, but again, you would lose all your physical books. And then I'm also thinking what if there's no more electricity and I can't charge my iPad, so I can't read my books on my iPad. So yeah, these thoughts do come across my brain, but the thing that calms me is just that I do have the most important book, and I also do carry one on me. So if those scenarios were ever to happen, I'm hoping to be covered. And it's also good to memorize your Bible. That way, you have it in here. Nobody can take that from you. So that's I feel like I glitched a lot there, but those are my reasonings. Those are my reasons why I don't own any physical books besides the Bible as a minimalist. And I hope this inspired you. Hope it gave you food for thought as to why you're collecting certain things or certain books, and if you plan on rereading them. If you don't, what's their purpose in your house? Yeah, just a reminder, you don't need to have a lot of books to prove that you're a reader or that you love books. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.